Hello and welcome everyone to Hoosier Gameday, brought to you by the Hoosier Network, where each week we'll break down IU football and give you all the latest updates and information that you need to know. My name is Noel Fary. Joined alongside me is Liv Clements. And Liv, we are just so excited to be able to bring everyone IU football this week.
We are excited. I'm ready to spill the tea. Tom Allen, 7th season. We're going for a big season this upcoming too. OSU, first game. There's going to be a lot to unpack here.
No, definitely. I mean, when you're starting your season with a game as big as this one, there's a lot of question marks, especially for a team with IU that already had a lot of questions. I mean, a starting quarterback debate, players leaving, players coming. But let's start off with talking about last season, which overall 4-8 on the season. It was tough to really put a specific marker on that year for IU.
For Hoosier fans, it was a hard season. Like you said, 4-8. IU only winning one away game. Not what you want to see. Not a good start into the season as well. But notable wins as well. Michigan State, they won that game away. Redemption games, Maryland, Rutgers. Those can be really good games. Rutgers being the homecoming game for IU this season. Notable returners as well. Cam Camper did tear his ACL in Week 8 against Rutgers. He has been playing. We'll see how that goes. But I think it could be exciting with the returners, with the schedule coming up. It will be good.
Definitely. And I think a big storyline that people focused on last year was the 3-0 start for IU. I mean, starting off the season with that win against Illinois, that stadium was roaring. I mean, the late game heroics really in a lot of their wins last year. It really came down to the wire. The Hoosiers were able to pull it away sometimes late, but other than that, not that much success to be found after that 3-0 start.
I mean, that says a lot. A 3-0 start gets the crowd going, gets the questions going, but that doesn't say anything. That's a long season football is. So for IU to go against OSU to start, it could be a big deal to see if that win or loss will impact the rest of their season.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned important returners. You mentioned Cam Camper. Another one that I want to talk about is Jalen Lucas, a return man for the Hoosiers who has deadly speed. I mean, this guy, he can move. And I think if you're able to integrate him into the offense a little bit more, that could be a recipe for success because the Hoosiers are a team that needs something dynamic. They need something to change the culture around IU football.
I mean, I totally agree. Like you said, Jalen Lucas, also Dexter Williams, Donovan McCulley, Cam Camper. Those are star returners that are going to be coming back. And IU will be looking at them to help lead this team. A lot of transfers, a very new team. So for these returners to come back, it'll be important. Like we said, Donovan McCulley started as quarterback, moved to wide receiver. Might go to quarterback again, might be a wide receiver. Like I said, we don't know. But it'll be interesting to see that quarterback position, who's starting, how impactful these returners will be on this upcoming season. Because for a big new team, these returners will be impacted. Try to get that flow going together. Try to see how seamless we can make this season. It will be interesting.
Yeah. So for some upcoming games for the Hoosiers, obviously you have the Ohio State opener, but that's not the only exciting matchup the Hoosiers have this season. They travel to Indianapolis to take on Louisville in Lucas Oil. I mean, that's just a really fun opportunity, not only for fans, but players too.
Exactly. It gives the players a little sense of what could happen after college with the NFL. It's exciting. And as a fan, to be in that stadium and see potential players that could go in the NFL, like you said, these games will be big. So we have Ohio State opener, Louisville and Lucas Oil, Rutgers homecoming game, as well as Purdue to finish. And that doesn't even count for the Big Ten teams that are just in the mix. You have Michigan, which everyone's saying is going to be a big one. I have to agree. Michigan's going to be a dominant team as well. But that also just leads to all these big games that are going to come, depending on where they are in the schedule. But to start big with OSU and to end big with Purdue, it will be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, speaking of Purdue, that's a team that has had IU's number. And, recently in some other sports, IU has been able to switch that tide. But in football, it would be big for the Hoosiers to be able to come away with a win this year. I mean, Purdue lost its starting quarterback, but that is a long way down the line. We still have a full season ahead of us. But we're going to have a special guest come on for us just a bit to talk about some important things with this weekend's matchup. So don't go anywhere. We'll see you right back. I'm joined with the Hoosier Network's very own Carlo Barone. And Carlo, you've been following this team so closely over the past few years. With this starting quarterback debate that's going on, I've got to get some of your thoughts on it.
Well, it's definitely the biggest storyline going into this season, I think, and a lot of people do. And really, it's between Braden Sorbsby and Taven Jackson. And Jackson, obviously being the brother of Trace Jackson Davis, the IU legend who just left. But Taven is definitely the guy that people want to see. You got to think about all the recruiting and all the hype around him to get him. It was a big deal. I mean, everyone was losing their minds. They get him. Like I mentioned, the connections with Trace, the family ties and everything. And then you've got Sorsby, who was on the team last year. He's still developing as a young quarterback. But if I had to guess, I said on our Hoosier Network podcast, I think it's going to be Taven Jackson that walks out with the Week 1 starters against Ohio State. But really, we really won't know until that moment.
No, definitely. I agree with you. And I think that putting Taven Jackson in might be exactly what the IU football culture needs. Trace was so important to IU. Everybody knows that. And to be able to go and get his brother, people were talking about it nonstop last season. Even with, Taven being somewhat of an unproven quarterback himself, people just want to see him out there. But to me, with all this secrecy that has been going on, it almost makes me think maybe it's going to be Sorsby. Because if it were going to be Taven Jackson, do you think maybe they would have come out and said that already, announced it for everyone, or do you think they still would have kept it under wraps?
I think it's more of a competitive advantage thing. They did the exact same thing last year with Connor Bazelak. A lot of people were questioning who was going to be a starter then, and it's kind of a similar situation to what we have now. And Bazelak being the transfer ended up starting Week 1 and started all the way until late in the season. I think it's pretty much the same situation. I would think it's Taven, but I would not be surprised if it's Sorsby because Allen talked about so much how it's been neck and neck. The entire fall camp, the summer, everything. It's just been right there, and it really took until the final few weeks to get a starting quarterback under their belt and really solidify who is going to be walking out with first-team offense.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned how much Tom Allen has been talking about it. Is he a guy this season that's sitting a little bit on the hot seat? I mean, that 2020 season is starting to get further and further in the past, and just lack of success overall. What do you think it would take to see Tom Allen be done this season?
It would take a lot. I feel like I do agree he's on the hot seat. He's one of the coaches in all of college football that signed a big deal not that long ago and has had pretty much little success since. I think it would take a lot to get him fired. And I only say that because of the buyout that he would need to get fired from the athletic department. I believe it's over $10 million still. And if you remember what it took to get Archie Miller out of the IU basketball program, it took a lot of funding from alumni and donors pretty much to kick him out. So Allen, until his buyout goes down, I don't think he'll be fired mid-season. Now, let's just say they don't win a Big Ten game and it's almost November and you're going into Purdue and you got maybe 1, 2, 3 wins. I mean, definitely questionable, but I think the money is a big factor in this potential firing.
No, definitely, and that's always going to be what it is in situations like that. But hopefully, Allen can put it together and get together a good season this year for IU. But overall, it's going to take more than just Tom Allen to turn this football team around. It's going to take some crucial players, some guys who step up into leadership positions and just be dynamic. That's what you need. So who are you looking forward to, Carlo, to watch on this IU team this year?
There's a lot of people to look forward to. I think the offense especially is going to be interesting because a lot of it's unknown. And you saw the emergence of Jalen Lucas towards the end of last year as a returner and a quick running back on the outside. I think he's one of IU's, if not the most exciting player on the team because every time he gets the ball, he might be taking it to them.
Yeah.
I would say Jalen Lucas and then even like Aaron Casey. I mean, it's pretty much his defense now. So for him to lead the group and a group that has an improved defensive line, Allen's talked about that a ton. I think Aaron Casey and Jalen Lucas are definitely 2 players to keep your eye on this season.
I definitely agree. I think transfer Andre Carter from up in Michigan this past season is a guy to look out for because overall on defense, the pass rush has always just kind of been almost non-existent for the Hoosiers in these past few years, and I think he's maybe a guy who can put it together. But we mentioned these are guys who need to step up to get those Big Ten wins. So how do you think this season IU is going to match up against Big Ten competition? Because last year they didn't fare so well.
Well, it doesn't help they play in the Big Ten East, which is one of the hardest divisions in all of college football, regardless of conference. So playing those teams each year is definitely harder for a program like IU that doesn't really necessarily have the money or the recruits to compete with people like that. So how they fare in the Big Ten, I don't think they'll be last. I think everything going on with Northwestern is just going to be very hard to deal with. You got to think Purdue lost their starting quarterback, starting wide receiver, and their head coach.
Yeah.
That is completely program shift. Illinois just lost their defensive coordinator, and the reason they were really good, I mean, they had Chase Brown too, but their defense was outstanding, and they lost their coordinator to Purdue. You've got Maryland that hasn't really added anything spectacular this offseason. You've got a lot of unknown teams, and I feel like IU kind of sits with that group as an unknown team. And if they take advantage of maybe their opportunities, maybe they can get ahead of the pack.
I couldn't agree more, Carlo. Thank you so much for joining us here, Carlo, on this Hoosier Game Day and some great analysis. We're going to send it over to Liv, who has another special guest with us to teach you a little bit more about Ohio State.
Hoosier fans, welcome back. I'm joined with Miss Kylee Corman, and we're going to break down some Ohio State, a little bit of IU, just to go into the game tomorrow to see if we're ready. Kylee, how are we feeling for the OSU-IU game? Are we excited? Is it kind of, how are we feeling about it?
I'm excited because college football is back.
Yes.
You can't not be excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as IU goes, I'm a little concerned for them, but I think that just comes with it, yeah.
I mean, Hoosier fans, they get a little worried. Going into OSU, last year they were 11-2, only losses against Michigan and Georgia. But they had some big draft picks going up. C.J. Stroud got drafted, which was a big part of their offense last year for the whole season, especially against IU. He was dominated us offensively for sure. So what does that say for OSU now? Does OSU still get to say they're OSU without C.J. Stroud, without a top quarterback really? And how will this affect star wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. with his plays going into offensively?
I think Ohio State's always going to be Ohio State. A backup quarterback at Ohio State is still at Ohio State. And I would say you could probably go down their depth chart in the quarterback room, and those quarterbacks are still going to most likely have a lot more talent than anyone at Indiana. And that's no offense to Indiana. It's just how it goes.
Exactly. And it would be dumb if IU slept on a quarterback at Ohio State regardless. Going into last year's game, IU versus OSU, hard loss for IU at home, which was a struggle. But you saw that OSU dominated offensively, tripling IU's rushing yards and going 200 to like 600. But IU had home advantage. So where does that play in it? And what does IU need to do this upcoming game to not have a repeat of last year?
I think there's a few things that Indiana are going to have to take advantage of if they want to be in this game. It's a home field advantage, like you said. Ohio State also has an inexperienced quarterback, so putting the pressure on the quarterback, forcing him to really think about his mistakes and just really applying that pressure. I think it could be a slow starting game. It's the beginning of the season for both teams. Still got to work out some kinks. There's question marks all over the place for both teams. You got to use that to your advantage if you're Indiana. And the pass defense. The pass defense has to be the best that it's going to be all year long. Earlier you asked if the quarterback situation would affect Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't really think it's going to. They have an incredibly talented wide receiver room. That defense needs to be there, and they might be able to stay in the game if all of those things go well.
I mean, we'll see. But like you said, there's a lot of question marks. For example, Tom Allen still hasn't announced who's IU's starting quarterback. Do you think that plays a factor into how OSU's going into this game? Do you think they're still in question marks? Or do you think that they should still come in as confident as they were?
I don't. I love Tom Allen. I love his approach in trying to be mysterious. I don't think it really matters that much. It's Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Ohio State, they did announce that Kyle McCord is going to be their starting quarterback.
Right.
But Allen and Bell talked about this week how they had to go back to high school to look at footage for these guys, which I'm sure Ohio State did the same thing for Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby. But I just don't know that it's really going to matter all that much. Ohio State is Ohio State, like I said.
Right, and like you said, OSU's going to be OSU. IU has a home advantage, really new team. No one really knows what to expect besides, you said, like game footage, where you have Nicholas Toomer coming from Stanford for us, EJ Williams coming from Clemson, and you have Kobe Minor coming from Texas Tech, cornerback. You don't really know how these players are all going to intertwine together.
Yeah.
So
There's 23 transfers this year. It's a new team.
It's a new team. And so it will be interesting to see how everyone adapts. And even with the Big Ten in general, you never really know where the standings are. So going into that with OSU, IU being their first game, OSU being IU's first game, what do you think this win or loss for IU will mean for the rest of the season? Not even just for the team, for Coach Allen. What do we think this means, win or lose? Do we think this will affect coaching staff, players, and just like IU's program as a whole?
Yeah. A win, if Indiana beats Ohio State, this town is burning down. It would be huge. A loss would not affect the team as much. I don't know the last time Indiana beat Ohio State. I don't know if anyone remembers that time.
It might have been a while.
But everyone's going into this game. Maybe not the team, but fans are going into this game. Reasonable fans are going into this game knowing it's going to be a loss. And that's kind of the expectation. If they flip that expectation, that would be crazy, and that would put a target on Indiana's back for the rest of the season. Really, a lot of expectations would come. But a loss, I think, should be brushed off for them and just go on to the next game. You've got Indiana State, Akron. Should be easy wins.
We'll
should
see.
be. But, yeah, a loss isn't going to do too much for the rest of the season.
And I think it's important to note that after this OSU game, IU has a fairly easy games after that, in their opinion, for ISU. Then it's Akron. So we'll see how they play against them. And then before going into Big Ten, where it's Michigan, Rutgers, Maryland, Purdue. So we'll see how it plays out. With that being said, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to head back to where me and Noel will give our season predictions, record, and then also for the game, what we think the score will be. And let's see if they're going to be bowl eligible.
Always a pleasure to hear from some of the most qualified minds here at IU. And with all the information we laid out today, it's time for Liv and I to give you our predictions for this Saturday's matchup. Now, Liv, I'll let you start it off.
Okay, so for this Saturday's matchup, I will be optimistic. I'll say 31-14, OSU win, but I feel like that's not bad for IU.
That's optimistic.
That's optimistic. I feel like that's not bad for IU. I think that could set a tone that they're here to play, and that going through the kinks and stuff like that as a new team, it could be a good start.
You know, for my prediction, I think I was a little bit more optimistic than you. It's still an Ohio State win, but I think everything goes right for IU. Everything goes wrong for Ohio State. They still win, but Ohio State pulls off the win 27-21. I mean, if IU can put up 3 touchdowns against Ohio State to start off the season, I think that's a win.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad about it. So I think that would be a good start for them. And just to see how they play out, see how the coaching staff goes, new players, returners. We'll just see how it starts.
Definitely. And then overall for the season, you know, maybe not necessarily anything concrete just yet. We still don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be. But for me personally, I would not be surprised if IU comes away with 3-4 wins this season. I think, you know, Indiana State, Akron, those are probably wins that IU can pull off. But then maybe go grab a couple wins in Big Ten play. You know, maybe Rutgers, Purdue. But I think that's kind of my personal ceiling for where IU can finish this season.
I agree. I think if IU wins the games they're supposed to win, they're expected to win, and then take some losses that they're expected to lose, but also maybe win some games that, hey, is a shocker, I'm going to go ahead and put them 6-6.
Okay.
Make them bowl eligible, maybe. I think that's solid for, even with the OSU loss, to win the games after that. Louisville and Lucas Oil would be a great game for them as well. So I think that will set the tone, and then we kind of go from there. But like you said, Big Ten games, you never know what can happen with those. So I think 6-6 is a good start, but like you said, we'll follow along through the season. We'll kind of see how it ends.
I mean, even with all the question marks that IU has, question marks means the potential for surprises. And maybe we'll see some breakout seasons this year. Who knows?
You never know.
That's why we're here, to give you all the information that you need to know as the season goes on. Thank you all so much for joining us on Hoosier Game Day. We'll be back next week with more predictions, information, and breakdown. For Liv Clements, I'm Noel Fary, and we'll catch you next week.